you really start understanding what controlling capital means at any level. Now, we all believe the best place to control capital is in a permanent whole life policy with a mutual company that's paid dividends for 100 plus years. That's the first place to control as much capital as possible because it is sound. We'll leave it at that. What you begin to realize is you don't have to go out and be some great investor. If you just start looking at where money is leaking out of your life by design, when I say by design, by banks, Wall Street, and IRS, and you start taking that over with the golden rule philosophy.
You had access to the gold. And most of the time, it's either people don't have money because they don't know what's going on in their world, so they literally don't save any money and they can't do the things, or they have turned their head and just given the control over to somebody else over their capital. And if they want it, they either have to jump through hoops to get it and pay penalties and taxes, or they have to argue with someone else about why it's a better opportunity to take the money out of where they're currently at.
First half is about behavior. And if we don't understand the problem related to behavior, the math doesn't matter.
Welcome to the Cashflow Legendz podcast with your hosts Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
Welcome back to Cashflow Legendz. You probably noticed that we're missing one of our normal sit-ins with Nate. He is living his best life, Brock, with the family. They are in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. And I've gotten a picture almost every day of a coffee cup and a back porch and a view. I think just trying to make me envious.
Yeah, must be nice. Must be nice.
But isn't that what good friends do? Why do you need enemies when your good friends are just going to always aggravate the heck out of you?
Yeah, that's right. Must be nice.
It must be nice. We hope he's having a great time. We really do mean that. On a connected note that often we talk about with business owners, the importance of recharging, but knowing why you've gone to zero or close and how to recharge is much different than not going to zero and thinking you need to recharge. And no different in any walk of life. We have ebbs and flows, but we have to be aware of those. And so going to the mountains and recharging is much more enjoyable when you put in the work that you've exhausted yourself and you need to recharge.
That's right.
And I think we can talk about that another time. That'll be another podcast episode of just like, what does that look like? What lessons have we learned the hard way? Bring in some experience of all of our mentors who've been doing it way longer than us. But today, Brock, we're talking about Nelson discussing and becoming your own banker, the golden rule. And it's a spin on what we've all heard as the golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more I get to dive into Nelson's writing, remember Nelson wrote Becoming Your Own Banker and it published in 2000.
Right.
He had been living and understanding and grasping the importance of how controlling the banking function works all the way through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So that's 30 plus years that he had been living this. So it wasn't like he was writing and teaching as he was learning all this thing that he knows and he speaks on. He had 30 years of experience and a lot of pain, and he'd seen a lot of different market fluctuations and all these things. And he says these things, and we'll tie into the golden rule. He says, once we know what the problem is, we'll know what to do. And that is the simplest statement that becomes more and more true every day I have conversations. You have to know what the problem is first, or you won't know what to do. All right. And then he often said, we have to be willing to rethink our thinking.
Yep.
All right. So, Brock, when you think about the golden rule just in general, whether it's Nelson and what he was talking about, or, what you learned growing up in the golden rule, touch on that just a little bit. And let's see if we can make some connections.
First, let's define what Nelson's golden rule was, which was he who has the gold makes the rules. And it also goes in line with one of the other sayings, which is opportunities always seek cash out. And, it's always funny. People make comments of, man, I wish I could invest in that. Man, I wish I could do that. Well, You could if you just had the gold, if you had access to the gold. And most of the time, it's either people don't have money because they don't know what's going on in their world. So they literally don't save any money and they can't do the things, or they have turned their head and just given the control over to somebody else over their capital. And if they want it, they either have to jump through hoops to get it and pay penalties and taxes, or they have to argue with someone else about why it's a better opportunity to take the money out of where they're currently at into another investment. And I've the more and more the more and more people I meet, the more I realize he who has the gold makes the rules. If you want an investment deal and you want better terms, well, bring the money to the table. Everything's negotiable, and when you have the money, people will listen.
Yeah, and Brock, when you say when you have the money, let's dive into that a little bit. I could have money in a few places. I could have cash in the bank. I could have a self-directed IRA, if it's a real estate deal. I could have equity in something that I was willing to negotiate with. But Nelson makes a point here. Perhaps it's because we have almost lost the concept of what capitalism is all about. Now, let's try to keep that at a high level and a simple level. Now, I'm going to say how I've begun to understand this, coming from one way of thinking and shifting. And then I want you to fill in the gaps and add or challenge anything that I say. When you say when we have the money, Brock, what I think of is when we have full control and certainty of the money. Because most of the time when I hear we have the money, before I read Becoming Your Own Banker, before I began to apply Nelson's principles or try to, I thought that meant I had to go to the bank to get a loan, or I had to borrow someone else's money, or I had to put up equity, and related to something I had. And I knew there was just something going on. I just didn't know how to get into the game. And so the only pathways I found at first were traditional recommendations. Now, let's be clear. Let's say this: traditional recommendations aren't bad. I had this conversation with a 22-year-old yesterday. What's bad is taking it at face value and not knowing why you're doing it, and not having the ability to compare it to something else and seeing which one you like better. And so you said stick your head in the mud, kind of. You didn't say it that way, but basically you kind of turn a blind eye. You don't pay attention. That's also what Nelson referred to as arrival syndrome, which is it's as good as it's going to get. I figured everything out. Can't teach me anything new. Or ho hum, woe is me. Everybody's out to get me. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So when you hear capitalism and you hear the golden rule, connect those from what I've said and what you think about, and all because you deal with different types of interactions sometimes than we do, where you
Mhm.
may be seeing that huge business deal where there's multiple people in on it. And
Mhm.
we may be working with that person who's like trying to recognize that this is happening in their own life.
Yeah. So I think we first start at the principle or the law of what stays at rest tends to stay at rest, and what's in motion stays in motion. If we understand that, then the same is true within our financial life, right?
Good.
So money in motion tends to stay in motion, while money at rest tends to stay at rest. If we took it a step further and we looked at economics, if everybody were to hoard all of their money, our economy would shut down. But when people go out and spend the money, when people go utilize the money, when people move the money through producers, right? Our economy thrives. So the more your money moves, the greater your personal economy is. So when I think about what you're talking about between the golden rule and capitalism, the more we can create the velocity of money with our dollars within our own personal economy, the better off we'll be. However, the key factor within that whole velocity of money portion is understanding exactly where it is that we would like to go. Because if
That's
you
a
don't,
Go
I
ahead,
would
Brock. Sorry.
I would say that if you don't understand the problem, then you don't know what to address. So look at where you're at today, figure out what your present position is, and see where you're going if your actions continue forward as of today. See what the outcome is and see what the costs are. Your job is working with us or somebody else is if I were to look at this and compare this to the perfect ideal plan, how could I in my own personal life make one move at a time to get closer to the perfect plan to where my costs are reduced and my wealth is increased?
So when you talk about my cost is reduced and my wealth is increased, I'm going to bridge in a conversation I've been having ongoing with a soon to be member of ULC, but more importantly, it's just been an opportunity to pour into somebody who wants to learn.
Mhm.
And I was telling you before we hit record, Brock, that although he has no foundational truths about money,
Mhm.
it's actually been easier to give him information for him to take action and learn and think about and apply because he has less to unlearn. Because he came to the table and he says, "This is what I don't know." And he says all the time, "I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. These are just things I think I know, but tell me what it is really or where to go to learn." That right there is the epitome of a perfect person that we want to work with.
Yeah, I wish I could see more people like that.
Man, and here's the kicker, Brock. You know why he would probably say he's like that? And maybe we'll have him on here years down the road to tell a story. Because what he's been doing hasn't been working. And he said for the last many, many years as an adult, the feeling of stress and angst and anxiety living paycheck to paycheck and not being able to focus on where he is able to bring the most value because he's always worried about money has brought him to this point. Pain is necessary often to start looking for new solutions. And so he has been a complete open book. And he said, when does this, when does this stop where we stop talking about this and think about this so that it doesn't? It's a life process. So he's becoming clear on what the problem is. All right. And that can be at a very elementary level because the more sound that elementary level understanding is, the easier it is to build sound things on top of it. It's the foundation. So sometimes, many times, often, it requires 2, 3, 4 steps backwards to really look at what you've been living your life on foundationally and then go, okay, that's soft, that's weak, that's a little flawed. There's really some missing pieces there. Let's break all that up. Let's dig down and let's start rebuilding. That's okay. Because if it's leading to us understanding what the golden rule means to us, per Nelson, he who has the gold makes the rules. It brings me to this point, Brock, and this is something that I've gotten to experience a lot lately with members of ours. It's so fun. When you really start understanding what controlling capital means at any level, now we all believe the best place to control capital is in a permanent whole life policy with a mutual company that's paid dividends for 100 plus years. That's the first place to control as much capital as possible because it is sound. We'll leave it at that. What you begin to realize is you don't have to go out and be some great investor. If you just start looking at where money is leaking out of your life by design, and when I say by design, by banks, Wall Street, and IRS, and you start taking that over with the golden rule philosophy, you'll have more control of dollars than you've ever had, and it will baffle you. And I've gotten more and more in this. You don't have to go out and be a great real estate investor. If you just want to control how money flows through your life, and that gives you peace of mind, you can do that. But that's still he who has the goal makes the rules, right, Rob?
That's right.
And that's such an important piece think about it this way. How much of your money, do it right now, write down as you're listening to this when you get a chance or watching, how much of your money is flowing out of your life every month? What if 10% of that could start flowing in to your life that you control? What if 20%? What if we could redirect it? What if 30%? What if 40%? That sounds crazy to people who don't realize that they can control the flow of money. And so the other day, Brock, I was talking to a guy, and he was experiencing a little pain. He's getting closer to retirement. Okay, air quotes for those of you not watching, because we have to be real clear on what does retirement mean to you. And he's like, the market's crazy, man. I don't know if I want to ride this wave anymore. And he said, what are your thoughts on this? I said, do you want me to ask you genuinely, or do you want me to tell you what you want to hear? And that's a good friend, not somebody that I just met off the street. He said, I want you to ask me genuinely what you think. I said, when your money goes down in the market, and you're watching it, because it's obvious you are in our conversation, does that money disappear? He starts chuckling. Because he's never been asked this question, because I got asked the same question years ago. He's like, no, it doesn't disappear, but it's gone from me. I said, where does it go? And we talked for a while, and he finally recognized and said, it goes to somebody else's pocket. It is not leaving or disappearing. It's shifting or residing somewhere else. And I said, do you control the rules of the market? Nope. He who has the gold makes the rules, and it is relevant and can be found. It's kind of like that saying, Brock. I don't remember how it's said exactly, but it's essentially, if you follow the money, you'll find your answers.
Mm-hmm.
You see that everywhere. It doesn't matter where it is. So Brock, he also says this, and you touched on it. And this is in 2000 when Nelson wrote Becoming Your Own Banker. We know lots of people who knew Nelson personally. Brock's dad knew Nelson personally. We have lots of mentors that knew Nelson personally between all of us. Nelson is on record as saying if he would have rewritten Becoming Your Own Banker, look at that. All right, Brock, what are you showing there?
This is one of the original paper copies of Becoming Your Own Banker.
Yeah.
And Nelson wrote a cool little note to my dad of 7/13/01.
7/13/01. So Nelson was on record as saying often, if he would have rewritten another edition of Becoming Your Own Banker after this one in 2000, which I think is the 5th edition, he would have left the numbers out of it, the illustrations.
Yeah.
Because the first half of the book, which we're walking through right now, it's a 92-page book, but in essence, it's way less than that when you factor in all the pages, what's on them. The first half is about behavior. And if we don't understand the problem related to behavior, the math doesn't matter. And that riles people up in a heartbeat because it brings them to the forefront of how they think about money.
Yep.
And so, Brock, why does that get many people, so on edge when you say, if you don't understand the problem, you won't know what to do. And if you don't understand the problem, the math doesn't matter. What does that really mean in your world and all the conversations you have?
I think it's just that people have an idea that it's just one way that it's supposed to occur within somebody's financial life. And, people talk all kinds of nonsense about, well, if you put money into a Roth or a brokerage or whatever it is for every month at $100 starting at age 18, you'll have this much money in retirement. Like, it doesn't happen. But that's what people want to have happen.
Because it sounds good. It feels good.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah. But, I know that, life is just linear and it only goes up and it's supposed to act that way. But you know what? It doesn't. So you've got to do the things that allow you to weather the different storms of life and the ups and downs throughout time. Like nothing is set in stone and then voila, it just works. Even the whole life insurance policies. You can look
Point.
at an illustration, but it's not going to be the exact same as the illustration is once you get it. It's going to be
Yep.
completely different. Dividends are going to change. You're going to use the cash. You may not pay a PUA the day that it's due. Um, you may pay loans back at a much later date. Like nothing is ever going to be the exact way that it's illustrated because life is different.
So, what I hear you saying that we get to talk about often that's relevant in our world that I need to take this advice I'm about to say, get real clear on what matters and know why it matters. And if nothing matters, let's have a whole nother conversation. But if you're clear on what matters, it's then you begin to measure what matters.
Yeah.
If you're unclear on what matters, then how the heck could we ever measure it? You can't. So I'm talking to a 22-year-old the other day, and he asked his family is already going through the process of rethinking their thinking. They're beginning to start whole life policies. They're beginning to use the policies for uh, short-term rentals. They have a very clear. They put in the work. Let's put it that way, and it's beginning to click. And so he's picking my brain because he's ex-ball player. We really connect, and he's like, "Hey, walk me through your thinking on what all these people say." It's perfect timing, Brock, on this Roth IRA compared to me funding my whole life policies or paying premiums. And I said, and the first question I asked him was, "Are you comparing them as if they're the same thing?" Because you got to know that first. Do you think they're both investments? Go back to Nelson at the beginning of the book. This is not about investments. It's about the process of banking and the fact that the need for financing things in our life will go on forever. That's what Nelson's point was. Financing things, Brock, could be real estate deals. It could be paying off debt because you feel better and more peace of mind there. It could be building up a pool of capital you control just because it gives you more peace of mind for the unforeseen things in the future, which by design are going to happen one way or another. Bob Castellone does a great job of pointing to this in his book Leap, Lifetime Economic Acceleration Process, where he talks about the eroding factors. Those eroding factors are happening and we don't even hardly recognize it. So Nelson makes this great point, and this is in 2000, but it could be written today. Then, why is there general despair in our country regarding financial matters? Just think about how much conversation, if you're a news watcher, I'm not, if you're an, watch X or keep up with TikTok or wherever you get your news from. Think about how much the conversation's related to money, some way, shape, or form. It may not be the thing they say, but it's related to money, the economy, inflation, cost of goods, politics, all that. He says, why are people paying through the nose for capital? Why the feelings of helplessness and futility? I say again, it all begins with faulty premises. And Brock, you just touched on that. You touched on some of those faulty premises when you said, well, just put your money over here, $100 a month for the next 30 years. And it'll all work out just fine. If we believe that to be true, can we confidently walk through why? And Brock, most of the time from our experiences, my personal experience, our conversations, it's normally that we are doing that because that's what everyone else is doing and that's what we've been told to do, even if it's built on a faulty premise. So our goal, our job, our responsibility, we believe, is to encourage anybody we work with to lean into being asked enough tough questions and asking them themselves that they become completely clear on what is and isn't important and why, and what tools they want to use to accomplish what is important for them. And Brock, some people may love the market. In my experience so far, the more people dive into what's really going on, the more clear it becomes that they know what they want to do. And I've heard at least 15 times over the last month, not me prompting it, by them saying it. This is not advice. I don't really like my money being in the market because I have no control. So why do we keep money in the market, Brock? I'm just using the market as an example. You can lose money on real estate. You can lose money on investing in gold. You can lose money in gambling. It doesn't matter. But why is the golden rule so important, and what is missing? And we'll kind of go into what Nelson talks about going on in the world.
When I think about this, one of the things that I think about is if you had a bunch of money in the stock market and you went to go borrow against it, how much will the bank let you borrow against it?
A certain percentage, but not all of it.
Yeah. So usually it's 50%, unless you have a larger amount, then it can get up to about 70, 75%.
Okay. Why?
How much can you borrow against your cash value? What percentage?
It's typically 95%.
But there are places that give you 100%.
100%. Yeah, that's true. Why is that?
And I think oftentimes, why is that? Is because, who controls it? Nobody knows, right? And what oftentimes people don't, the thing that I think about a lot of times is, yes, your plan might work out the exact way that they tell you. You put your money in here, they'll show you the $1.5 million that you might have. But what they're not showing you is the $900,000 it's going to cost you to get there.
Mm-hmm. Opportunity cost or cost of capital or the cost of doing business with who is holding your money and the contract connected to it.
Yeah.
So Brock, we'll tidy up with this. If we know this is all going on, and this is why Nelson said that this book, Becoming Your Own Banker, was not written for insurance agents to sell a product. It was written for the common average Joe to think about how money's flowing through his life and the human problems that we create that we can start to take control of to allow us to keep more of the money we earn. So that then we can get better on that money we're keeping to turn it into more money, which Brock, you alluded to beautifully with the velocity of money, which the velocity of money only works exceptionally well, more consistently, when you control the capital and the terms and the rules. And you are first priority. So the simple question I have people ask often is tell me where your money is. Write it down right there. Just write it down on a piece of paper and list all the rules to where you keep your money. What's the rate? Is it taxed? When is it taxed? How is it taxed? Who controls when you can get it? How much can you borrow against? What does it give you? And just go through and think through that. And what we figure out is the play that in the life we're living with money, banks, Wall Street, and IRS have created rules with these products that they win by design. It didn't happenstance. And I'm gonna end on this, Brock, and you tidy us up with anything you want to add. Nelson Nash talked about often words matter. Why do we have words like securities that we believe is where we should put money, and it is the opposite of what the definition of security means? It's a really good place to start.
There is so much to unpack there with marketing, how marketing works, the power of words. It's kind of like if you asked anybody if there was a difference between saving and investing, they would say yes. But then you look at their retirement plan, and what is it called? A retirement savings plan. Tell me who saves within their retirement plan. Like nobody. They invest their money. It's really in a retirement investment plan. And if you don't think that the government and financial institutions and corporations don't know that, maybe you're out of luck. Maybe you just can't go forward.
Yeah, that's true. That's good. Rock,
Because at the end
go
of the
ahead.
day, if we just looked at what they had compared to what you have, their building's a whole lot bigger than your house.
Yeah, so if we start with facts, Brock, and maybe we'll do a couple of episode breakdown of the facts of what's going on. Nelson referred to it as the play often. They know there's a play going on. They just don't know all the players in the play, and they don't know what they're controlling and what role they're playing. And make no doubt about it, if we don't start leaning in what the problem is, we are the product. There's no way around it. And we are being used for everything it's worth to the people that created the play, banks, Wall Street, IRS. But here's the good news. There's a different way to do it. There's a different way to think about it. There's a different way to learn. But if and only if we are willing to rethink our thinking, that's it. And if we're not, we're going to stay where we are and keep getting the results we've been getting.
Yeah, or just simply thinking about what we think.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a good point.
Start.
That's a great start. That's exactly right. All right, Brock, this is a good conversation. I think there's so much more we could unpack with this, but I think at a high level, understanding that he who has the gold makes the rules. Opportunity finds capital, and it's important to understand that capital that you control with terms that are designed for you and I first is much different than capital that someone else controls where you're second, third, fourth, fifth in line. So the next time, we hope this has been beneficial. We hope at minimum it's encouraged you to think about how you think. Spend a little time exploring how you think about where your wealth resides, where it goes, and why. And we are always honored to have the opportunity to work with you. I say this very humbly. If you're willing to learn, we're willing to teach. If you just want to tell, we're not willing to teach. And I mean that genuinely, because I've been on the other side of that, knowing too much. So it requires some humility from all of us to go, hey, what do we not know? And that's how we start going. So we hope you enjoyed this. We appreciate all the likes, subscribe, sharing, comments. It's very helpful in the algorithms and the powers that be behind the scenes and how all this gets out to people. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.